All right. Ready for a deep dive into a life that's, well, extraordinary? Sojourner Truth, she's got that famous "Ain't I a Woman" speech.
Right, but honestly, that's just scratching the surface.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here for, right? To uncover those layers.
What gets me is how she ties together, I don't know, like intense personal struggle with this powerful voice for change. You can't separate her message from her life, being born into slavery late 1700s.
Okay, so let's rewind to the beginning then. Isabella Bonfrey, that was her given name, and those early years in New York. Now, this might surprise some folks, but we're not talking about the South here.
And that's important, right? Slavery existed in the North, too. Might have looked different from those big plantations we picture.
It was still brutal.
Absolutely. I mean, when you hear about Isabella being sold multiple times, even alongside sheep once, it just shows you the cruelty at its core, no matter where it was.
Imagine being 9 years old, sold for $100. The sources even say she was sold a few more times after that.
It's just awful. And then there's her time with John Neely, one of the enslavers. It highlights this whole other layer of injustice. Language barriers.
Well, right, I read about that.
Yeah, he'd beat her because she couldn't understand his English commands. She mostly spoke Dutch back then.
Adding insult to injury? Seriously. But here's where it gets amazing. Even facing all that, Isabella, she fights for her freedom.
Oh, absolutely.
Ooh.
When New York starts phasing out slavery, she doesn't just wait around. 1826, she takes her infant daughter, Sophia, and escapes. Breaks free from a master who went back on his word about emancipation.
Talk about brave, but escaping, that's got to be just the first hurdle, right?
You got it. And this is where you see her incredible tenacity, I guess.
Yeah.
She gets her own freedom, but then she's fighting like hell to get her son back.
Peter, right, he was illegally sold.
All the way to Alabama, can you believe that?
Yeah.
But Isabella, she takes Atman to court and wins.
Serious.
One of the first black women to successfully sue a white man. Think about that. A monumental win, especially back then when the system was totally against her.
What a testament to her just refusal to back down when it came to family. It's like this early glimpse into her future, becoming this huge advocate.
Yeah, you could totally say that. That personal win, it's almost like planting the seeds for what she'd do on a bigger scale later.
And this is also where things shift, right? More towards the spiritual side. What leads to this whole Sojourner Truth transformation?
So after escaping slavery, she has this profound religious experience, leads her to change her name in 1843. But it wasn't just a name, it was like a calling, a mission she had to pursue.
So she's Sojourner Truth now. Traveling and spreading truth, that's powerful stuff.
Really is. You can hear that deep faith in her words. It's in everything she does.
And that purpose, it leads her right to the abolitionist movement, yeah.
Right into the thick of it. And she doesn't just join, she becomes a leading voice.
We're talking working with Frederick Douglass, William Lloyd Garrison, Harriet Beecher Stowe. Big names.
Can you imagine those conversations? The impact she had, working alongside those figures, it's incredible. But what set her apart, I think, was how she wove in her own stories, those personal narratives, so powerful.
It wasn't just ideas with her, it was lived experience. You felt it.
Exactly. She laid bare the brutality of slavery, the physical, the emotional, everything. And it became this powerful, powerful argument against the whole institution.
Heartbreaking, but you can see how effective it would have been. Those audiences, they must felt her words deeply.
And her influence wasn't limited to just speeches. Civil War breaks out. She's right there recruiting black troops for the Union.
Wow, and she met Lincoln too, right, in 64.
Face to face. This woman, born into slavery, now she's talking to the president, advocating for her people. Incredible when you think about the times.
Yes, remarkable.
They talked about her work during the war and, of course, about emancipation. But Sojourner Truth, she saw beyond just ending slavery, She wanted true equality for freed people, social and economic inclusion. A fight that's sadly still going on today, right?
Makes you think about how far we still have to go. Yeah. But we can't talk about her without mentioning those famous words, "Ain't I a woman?" Still resonates so strongly.
It really captures her whole approach, this intersectional perspective long before that was even a term.
For those who might not know the whole story, set the scene for us. Where's this speech happening? What's she arguing for?
Okay, so picture it. 1851. Women's Rights Convention in Akron, Ohio. Women's rights movement's gaining steam, but it's got its own divisions, especially along racial lines.
And she calls it out.
Oh, yeah. Challenges those limited ideas of what it meant to be a woman back then, ideas that were mostly about white women's experiences. Like a lot of arguments for suffrage at the time, they focused on this idea of women being more moral, more refined than men.
So they deserved a voice in politics because of it. That was the thinking.
Exactly. And so Sojourner Truth, she sees right through it. She's like, if we're talking about morality, about intellect, black women should be leading the charge. They've endured so much, overcome so much.
And the way she does it, so witty, so powerful. Like when she talks about her own strength, how she'd worked as hard as any man, harder probably, that whole weaker sex thing, it just falls apart.
Brilliant strategy, right?
Mhm.
She's not asking to be recognized, she's demanding it. And not just for herself, for all black women.
Such a powerful moment, declaring her right to be heard, her right to be recognized. Something I was thinking about, though, there's still this debate, right, about what the "Ain't I a Woman" speech, like the actual words, how accurate it is.
Yeah, and it brings up a big point about history in general. You know, it gets told and retold, but always through different lenses, different perspectives.
Yeah.
And those biases, they creep in.
Makes sense. So with this speech, we've got all these versions floating around. How do we even know what Sojourner Truth actually said?
It takes some real digging, like piecing together a puzzle. You got to look at the historical context, who was writing these things down, and accept that some versions, they might have been changed over time, embellished. You know.
Right, to fit someone else's narrative.
Exactly. Like the version everyone knows today, it was actually written down years later by Frances Dana Gage, a white abolitionist. Some folks think she might have played up Sojourner Truth's dialect, made it more appealing to a white audience at the time.
So it's not just about the words themselves, but who's doing the writing, the interpreting, makes you think. But still, even with the different versions, the core message, that feeling of recognize my humanity, it comes through.
Oh, absolutely. And we got to remember, her fight didn't end with slavery. In her mind, that was just one step toward real equality.
Right, because what's freedom? Without opportunity, without a chance to build a life for yourself. So tell me about Reconstruction. What was her focus then?
Sojourner Truth, she was adamant about economic independence, believed that formerly enslaved people, they deserved a real stake in the society they helped build. So she becomes a huge advocate for land, for giving land back.
Like actual land grants from the government.
You got it. Even meets with President Grant to make her case. Argues that this is essential for black communities to thrive. For her, it wasn't charity. It was about justice, righting a historical wrong.
Wow, she really was thinking ahead, seeing those systemic barriers so clearly. It's sad that her petition, it didn't go through.
It is. But her vision, it exposes the limits of Reconstruction, you know, and it connects to these conversations we're still having. Reparations, economic justice. It's like history is rhyming. Same fight, different generation.
It's true. We like to think things are linear, but progress, it's not that simple. Sojourner Truth, she understood that. And it wasn't just about one issue for her either, right? She saw the connections, the way different forms of oppression, they intertwine.
Exactly. That intersectional perspective, she embodied it. Like her work with the temperance movement. Alcohol abuse, it was rampant back then.
Right. Huge problem.
And Sojourner Truth, she saw how it devastated marginalized communities, especially women, families. Her advocacy there, it shows her empathy, her understanding of how these social problems, they don't exist in a vacuum.
It all ties back to that idea of her being ahead of her time, seeing the bigger picture. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Sojourner Truth, her life, her work, what do you hope sticks with our listeners? What's her legacy from you?
For me, it's that courage. She never backed down from speaking truth to power, no matter how dangerous it got. Used her voice to lift up others, especially those who were most vulnerable. Sojourner Truth, she's a pioneer, plain and simple. She challenges us to recognize the complexity of identity, and we're not just one thing, and to fight all forms of oppression wherever we find them.
Powerful way to put it. So yeah, next time you hear those words, ain't I a woman, think about the whole picture.
Okay.
It's a powerful speech, no doubt, but it's just one piece of a much bigger legacy. A legacy that pushes us all to fight for a better world, a more just world, and that's something worth remembering, always.